You're listening to the Minutes on Growth podcast, the show that brings you mindfully curated insights into relationships, spirituality, personal development, and everything in between, with your host, Tannaz Hosseinpour.
Hi, soul friends, it's Tannaz Hosseinpour, and welcome back to another solo episode of Minutes on Growth. This is officially the 100th episode, and to be honest, I can't believe it. When I started the podcast 6-7 years ago, I had no idea I would end up where I am today. Primarily because my life did not turn out how I expected it to, how I had planned it to. But interestingly, the other day my mom asked me if I could change any part of my life right now. If there was a magic wand, what I would use it for. And I was surprised when my answer after a long pause was nothing. Despite all the ups and downs, which I'm going to share with you in this episode, I believe I genuinely like where I am today. The other day I was listening to a podcast with Robert Edward Grant, and he shared something that gave me goosebumps. He said, "Learn to fall in love with your destiny. It's all connected. It's all divine. Maybe what we call destiny is just a free will of our higher selves." Wow. Maybe what we call destiny is just the free will of our higher selves. To me, it meant that whatever we go through is for our highest good, chosen by our higher selves, even if we can't see it in that moment. But everything is here to help us grow, to help us evolve, to help our soul expand. And there truly are no coincidences. And now that I'm looking back on my journey, I can say this with certainty. I know this for a fact. And the reason I'm sharing this with you today, the reason I've decided to share this with you today is because over the years, I've cultivated this belief deep into my subconscious mind that I live in a supportive world, that the universe always has my back, that everything is rigged in my favor. And what has helped me cultivate this belief is hearing stories from other people where they've had similar experiences. So I know that the more we see something is possible for other people, it becomes possible for us too. When we see that other people are experiencing a world where there are no coincidences, that they're divinely protected, that they're supported, it makes it feel possible for us. So I've shared bits and pieces of my entrepreneurial journey over the past couple of years, pieces that I felt comfortable sharing. But now I feel like this moment, this milestone, is the right time to go back a little bit further and show you how, quote unquote, those random moments in my life, those moments where I felt I was off track or I was being rejected, was in fact moments where I was being redirected and protected. And they all ended up being connected to each other after all. So let's begin. For as long as I can remember, I have been good at public speaking. And that gift allowed me to take on many leadership roles, starting from the age of 2 when I was the head student and leader in my kindergarten. Shout out Regents in Dubai. I would always get the main roles in my school plays, and this continued up until grade 12 even, when I was, the head of the social issues club, prom committee, yearbook committee. I pretty much loved being involved in leading and organizing and planning. And the beautiful part was that it never felt overwhelming. I had a full schedule from morning to night, but because they came so naturally to me, I actually enjoyed it and I was energized by it. And I speak a lot about this in my Discover Your Life Purpose program, where we have two types of gifts. We have gifts that we're born with, so they are natural gifts, and gifts that we learn, through other people, through the programs that we take, the school that we go to. So leading and organizing and planning were, some of my natural gifts. And I guess that's what my parents were convinced from day one, that I was meant to be a lawyer. And so I had this belief of theirs imprinted deep into my subconscious mind from the early days, and it played a major role in developing my sense of identity. So I always saw myself as a lawyer too. When I graduated high school in Toronto, I decided to move to Washington, D.C. to get my undergraduate degree in political science, the degree that most students obtain prior to attending law school in North America. So their belief was now my belief. It was my automated vision as well. And I never questioned it. So while I was studying at GW, I took a religion course as one of my electives because I wanted an easy A. And that's when my initial path slightly took a turn, but I didn't know it back then. I really enjoyed learning about religion, so I started to take more and more courses on Hinduism, Taoism, Zennism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, you name it. I was fascinated by how powerful religion was in shaping people's perspectives. And overall, the role it played in, either bringing people together, creating communities, or breaking up communities through war and conflict. Because I grew up in a very unique household, unique Middle Eastern household. My father had his own religious beliefs. He was a practicing Muslim who surprisingly never pushed his beliefs onto us. So whether he was praying or he was fasting or, he was reading the holy text, he never pushed his beliefs. He thought his religion as a very private matter. And my mother, for as long as I can remember, she was always spiritual. She was always sharing stories and teachings of different mystics with us, such as the works of Rumi and Shams, my absolute favorites. But despite their differences, the idea of a loving God was always present in our home. And so it was always a big question for me as to why certain people hated religion or, hated the idea of God. So when the opportunity to study religion came up, and I was able to, study different textbooks, their historical context, how, certain religions were politicized, how some people took advantage of that, it really allowed me to better understand those people and why they felt how they felt and how their feelings impacted their experience of reality. So studying religion was my first real introduction to, the human psyche and psychology. And as much as I enjoyed studying religion, and I did add it as one of my majors in my undergraduate degree, the automated vision, as I mentioned, was always to be in law. So after graduating, I started studying for the LSATs, and I found myself in a master's in law program specializing in international and commercial dispute resolution at the University of Westminster in London. So I loved politics, I loved history, I loved law, so it made sense to choose that type of law to specialize in. And I guess I was back on track, or so I thought. The only difference was, this time I was a completely different person. While I was studying religion and political science at GW, I experienced my first major life quake. So life quakes are unexpected events that turn your life upside down. I'm still not comfortable sharing what that was, but it really did turn my life upside down. And it was my first encounter with learning the art of detachment beyond my previous encounters with it when I would, go through a breakup, breaking up with my boyfriend, or even when my parents separated, as difficult and challenging as that was, despite them having a very civil separation. But it still was challenging. But despite how challenging, those previous breakups were, my parents' separation was. This life quake was at its own level. It brought me face to face with my fear of not being in control, and I'm a type A person, so that was really difficult for me. I had always been a planner. I planned everything up until I think my 90th birthday, when and where I would graduate from, where I would work, what I would do, when I would get married, when I would have kids, when I would retire. I had it all mapped out, and overnight circumstances beyond my control, beyond my parents' control, turned it all upside down, which reminds me of the quote, "Man plans and God laughs." But it was an overnight shift. And I'm not going to lie, that life quake was tremendously challenging for me. It was only 20 years old. There was no logic to why it was happening, and no amount of money or resource could help me find a solution. Trust me, I tried. So I was forced to sit in uncertainty, to face the unknown, and to detach myself from how I thought life had to pan out. And I just didn't know how to do that. So one day, in the depths of my despair, as I was laying in my bed in my family home in Toronto, crying my eyes out, my mom came into my room and she handed over 2 books to me by Dr. Wayne Dyer, bless his soul. I've always been a reader, so when she gave me those books, I didn't even question it. I love to read. And they were called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, and the other one was The Power of Intention. And those books were my first direct encounter with spirituality. I mean, I'd heard my mom talk about so many of these concepts, but I never really grasped it. So all his words, despite having heard them before, felt new to me. I was so amazed by his belief system, his thoughts, and the way he articulated them that I pretty much read all his books in, I think, less than a month. And no, I didn't find any solutions because, as I mentioned, there weren't any. But I started to feel as if the question of why is this happening to me started fading away. And a new sense of calm was re-entering into my life. Calm in the midst of chaos, something I had never experienced before. In the past, when there was chaos, I would be panicking and stressing about it. But somehow his words and his writing touched my soul. It helped expand my soul. And it introduced the concept of acceptance, accepting what is just as it is. And acceptance, wow, well, acceptance started to take that heaviness and that pain away. I started to see the world through a different perspective. I started to see the divine in places where I would once only see logic. I started to trust the universe's plan even when it was significantly different than mine. I learned about the ego and how it had a voice of its own. I learned about the subconscious mind and how it silently ran the show. I started to see how my thoughts and actions had impacted my experience of reality. And I started to try and take accountability for it. I say try because, that was a lot to process at that age. And I don't think I even understood the magnitude of that awareness, that download that was flowing through me. So when I was studying dispute resolution law, while I thoroughly enjoyed the material and content, something felt different this time because I was different this time. At first, I thought this confusion was related to the type of law I was studying, so after my program ended, I enrolled in another master's program, this time in oil and gas trade management, thinking I would enjoy practicing law in that specific industry instead. So shifting from politics to corporate, since it's an industry that is very dominant in the Middle East, and I always thought, I was always open to the idea of going back to Dubai where I was raised. But even after completing that program, something still felt off. I couldn't figure out what was missing, and I couldn't realize that, hello, you've changed. There's been an internal shift. So I didn't know, where this resistance was coming from. So as soon as I graduated, I quickly moved back to Canada, and I started getting trained in family mediation this time. Looking back, I am amazed at why I didn't pause and go inwards to seek the answers instead of just desperately moving around, frantically looking for the answers externally. I mean, I understand because I was programmed to always be doing something. And I thought that if I wasn't doing something, I wasn't accomplishing anything. And I didn't really like that feeling. I felt like I was wasting time. And I never paused to ask myself, why am I doing what I'm doing? Whose desire am I pursuing? Do I even want to do this? Am I doing it to people please, to serve my ego, for validation? But a decade later now, and I have finally learned that my worth is not dependent on how much I do, and that pausing is okay, and that it's imperative to intentionally create spaces to practice curiosity, to ask these questions, and to allow the answers to flow through me, to ensure that what I'm doing is aligned with my soul's dharma, and that I have clarity over, the consciousness of my actions and intentions. But I guess all of that was part of the journey too, learning that we are human beings and not human doings, to honor my soul's plan instead of that of others, and to realize that true validation comes from within. Anyways, back to the family mediation course. I remember sitting in my first class watching a settlement video and thinking to myself, wow, how can couples who once loved each other so much be so angry that they're fighting over who gets the furniture in the divorce settlement? And the interesting part is, when my parents got divorced, and despite the fact that they had a very civil separation, I never once got curious about relationships and, why the relationship ended and how they could have been proactive about it. But that day, that question mark, that curiosity led me to introducing relationship books into my library, because up until that point, it was all about reading different modalities of spirituality. But that question, that aha moment, introduced a new genre. So I guess it's true, when our soul is ready, that wisdom or that insight or that curiosity is activated. I guess I wasn't ready, 10 years prior to that when my parents were getting separated, but I was ready that day in that class. And the universe works in mysterious ways, because right around that same time I entered into a relationship with someone who I had known for almost a decade, so we knew each other quite well. I'm an Aquarius, and Aquarians are known for being extremely logical. But when we decided during that time to get into a romantic relationship together, it was one of the easiest and fastest decisions I've ever made in my life, even though it meant that I had to leave Canada once again since he lived in Dubai. But when we made that decision, my soul screamed out yes before my mind even had a moment to process it logically. I would have to give up my plan. I would have to make major sacrifices. But my soul knew that he was the person for me, at least in that moment. My soul recognized that the phase of my journey was meant to be experienced with him. So I moved to Dubai with absolutely no idea as to what I was meant to do career-wise, because licensing was so different in Canada and the UAE. And this, in my opinion, is where the story really gets interesting. So the first couple of months back in Dubai were so challenging. Here I was, after studying for 7 years, sitting in my living room, feeling unfulfilled, that I wasn't using my potential, that I wasn't sharing my gifts, what I had learned. And I kept asking myself, was love worth it? Because I was so worried that, as Dr. Wayne Dyer would say, I would die with my music still left in me. So I kept asking myself, should I suck it up? Should I take the additional courses I need to work as a mediator? But every time I would think about that, my body would freeze. It felt heavy and not aligned with who I was anymore. And it didn't feel like I was meant to be doing that. That version of me that comes to life, in a mediation room, is not who I wanted to embody. But at the same time, I didn't want to just be barely getting by, freelancing for my parents' businesses here and there. I wanted to be financially independent. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted my presence on this earth to make a difference. I wanted my career to be aligned with my values and my vision. I wanted to have fun working the same way both my parents loved their careers. So I knew it was possible because it was modeled for me, but I couldn't find a way for it to work for me. So one day, sick and tired of how I was feeling, I decided to open my laptop and I asked myself this one question that I had heard on a podcast earlier that week. What is one thing that I do really well that I could never imagine charging people for because it's so easy and so much fun for me? I'm going to repeat that question because that question changed my life. And it is, what is one thing that I do really well that I could never imagine charging people for because it's so easy and so much fun for me? And you might be surprised by the answer, but it was helping people get into university. I know, super random. But my friends would always come to me with their admissions applications, and because I was familiar with the Canadian, US, and British system through my own multiple experiences in high school, undergrad, postgrad, somehow what others thought of as a very daunting process was easy for me. And so, I would be able to help them. I would be able to help simplify the process for them. So I started to think to myself, what if I could help strangers with their application journey too? So I spent the next couple of days working on creating a website that offered academic consulting services. And once I was done with the website, I closed my laptop with a prayer that if this was what I was meant to do right now in this moment in time, then for the universe to show me the way, because I had absolutely no idea. Honestly, after a couple of days, I forgot about the website. Or as we like to call it in the manifestation world, I unknowingly surrendered the intention. So surrender plays a big role in the process of conscious manifestation. I talk about this in my free manifestation masterclass. But I didn't know I was surrendering at that time. I just genuinely forgot. And out of the blue, I received the most random call from my dentist in Iran, who asked me if I knew anyone who could help his friend's son with his Canadian university application. I mean, can you imagine? I was thinking to myself, is he serious? How is that even possible? This is such a random call. I don't think my dentist has ever called me before. And now he's asking me for this. And just like that, I was like, yes, that's exactly what I do, because I remember the website. And that is how my first business came to life. TP Education Consultants is still helping hundreds of students around the world with their academic journey. And it all started with that one question that I asked myself while sitting alone, super sad and unfulfilled in my living room. And the rest of my businesses have started the exact same way too, including this podcast. I have received inspiration through other people at quote unquote random times that I've just taken inspired action on. So after TP Education was registered and set up, all the rest naturally unfolded in the same way. So one day I was posting on my social media, sharing my view on a political event that was taking place back then. I don't remember exactly what it was. And I received a message from a friend who I had not spoken to in years. And he suggested I start a podcast where, I would bring people together, create a space where I would bring people together with different opinions, and we would discuss Middle Eastern politics. At that point, I knew that coincidences don't exist and that the universe speaks to us through others. So I paused and I started to reflect on the idea, okay, a podcast sounds great. I love speaking, but the topic doesn't resonate. I love politics, but I don't want to create content around it. So I asked the universe, I feel like you're listening to me all the time, so tell me what that topic should be. Simultaneously, around the same time, one of the girls at a book club that I had started when I moved back to Dubai came up to me and said, why don't you become a life coach? I looked at her and I said, what is a life coach? I've never heard that term before. So she walked me through a few profiles of life coaches on Instagram, and I was intrigued. I went home, I started to research about it. And that night I decided I'm going to schedule a call with my spiritual teacher because I need to know what the universe is suggesting. What am I supposed to do? Because it all feels really random. I'm having, so many suggestions come my way. And so we got on a call. He asked me to do something that literally was like a light bulb switching on. He asked me to close my eyes and go back to my childhood and to try and remember how I would spend my free time. And he asked, what were the games that I would play on my own? And what were the games that I would play with my best friends? And as I reflected on those questions, I started to cry my eyes out. Whether I was alone or with my best friends, Anud and Selma, who I still talk to, wonderful, beautiful souls, we would spend almost all of our time playing teacher and student. I loved playing the teacher role. In that moment, I realized, wow, I've always loved being a teacher. I think my archetype is to be a teacher. In fact, I tutored my friends in middle school, I tutored in high school, and even in university, tutoring was always my side hustle, and I loved it. I even remembered when I was 5, I was given this role to play as a teacher in one of my school plays where I was teaching the audience about recycling. I remembered the script of that monologue word by word. I still remember it word by word. And honestly, if my parents didn't imprint the lawyer suggestion into my subconscious mind, I most probably would have been a teacher. I would have, been a tutor, a teacher, a professor. I would have been in academia. But now it made sense. The podcast suggestion, the life coaching suggestion, even the education consulting firm, they all had the same element in common, education. And they all had the same, they all expected me to show up in the same way, to embody that teacher archetype. Even the law degree made sense because, it led me to family mediation, which led me to wanting to learn more about relationships. So instead of helping out people divorce each other, I could help them cultivate relational skills that would enhance the quality of their relationship instead. So all those books, all those seminars that I had attended for years, they all had a purpose. And now I understood. I understood what energy I was supposed to embody. So I enrolled in a coaching program. And at the end, we had to choose a niche. So I chose relationships. And, I also love teaching the art of manifestation because I've manifested so many wonderful things in my own life. And then I got trained in NLP and child behavior, and I became a breathwork coach. I really committed to doing the work so that I could show up to the best of my ability and serve and share, because I really believe that our purpose, our grandest purpose on life, is to share and to leave the world a better place. And we do that by using our gifts, by serving. And that is, soul friends, how the Minutes on Growth podcast and coaching platform started. Well, initially it was supposed to be called Pillars of Growth, but if you've been following me for a while, you know that I like to get straight to the point and not waste time. So it made sense to bring in the word minutes. So Minutes on Growth. And with the podcast, I now had a space where I could teach. And for content, well, I had spent hours and hours reading hundreds of books, enrolling in different programs, studying under the mentorship of different spiritual teachers for decades. So they were all there for a reason, this reason. And now I could share what I had learned about relationships, spirituality, conscious entrepreneurship, and mindset work, because those insights, those aha moments saved me and my soul from being stuck in the darkness of my first life quake at the age of 20, and all the others after it, including the one where years later my partner and I separated as a result of circumstances beyond our control. The universe really wants me to master the art of detachment. And as noted in the Bhagavad Gita, detachment is not that you own nothing, but that nothing owns you. So, as shocking and difficult as a breakup was, and one day I'll share it with you all, this time I had the tools to help me navigate through it with a little bit more ease and grace. So to summarize it for you, all of these life quakes taught me lessons that I really wanted to pass forward. I wanted others who were experiencing life quakes to know that they weren't alone, and that healing and even growing and evolving from wounds, deep wounds, were possible. I wanted you, the audience, to know that it's okay if you don't have it all figured out, because no one does. It's okay if you're struggling, because we all go through challenges. It's okay if life sometimes doesn't make sense, because uncertainty and change are both constants in life. It's okay if we face rejection, because rejection is really protection and redirection. But if we allow ourselves the grace to pause, the courage to seek help, the flexibility to allow our soul to realign itself, to redirect itself, the courage to go within, to sit with uncertainty, to surrender, to allow our higher self the free will to take us where we're meant to be, to accept life, to show up, life will surprise us. Everything, as challenging as it may be at times, is here for our highest good. I hope my story reminds you of this truth. And if we allow life to move through us, and if we allow ourselves the opportunity to enter this world as person A and leave it as person B, that's when we can fall in love with our destiny. Will the journey be easy and free of challenges? No, not at all. No matter how amazing and skilled we get at the art of manifestation or the epic growth mindset we cultivate, challenges will always exist. No one is immune to them. It's how we face them, it's how we process them, and how we deal with them that defines our experience of reality. Will everyone understand your journey? No. I cannot tell you how many times I've been ridiculed for choosing this path and for saying no to the safer routes. I cannot tell you how many times my inner critic has taken other people's criticism and used it to make me feel as if, I'm an outcast, or I feel less than or not good enough. I cannot tell you how many times at the beginning my parents, despite being supportive, tried to, convince me to go back to the original plan. I understand that this was a projection of their fears that the non-traditional route isn't sustainable long term. It was one of their beliefs from their society that they had, picked up on. And, they no longer say it, but I did have to learn to not take it personally and to honor my truth and to honor what my soul was asking me to do. And I'm not going to lie, there were moments in the beginning when I wanted to give up. But the universe, through quote-unquote coincidences, kept reminding me to have faith and to trust it all. And every time I would take a different path, the universe would redirect me. It would realign me. It has its own GPS. It takes you back where you're meant to go if you allow it, if you're flexible. So looking back on, Minutes on Growth's timeline over the past 6 years, all the hundreds of clients I've coached, the retreats I've hosted, the workshops I've facilitated, and with the podcast, all the solo episodes I've recorded, the amazing and even more, the amazing, beautiful souls I've had the privilege of interviewing and learning from. Having this space where they could share their stories, their gifts, their wisdom, their aha moment. I am truly honored to have been able to do that, and I am grateful for the journey that allowed me to do that. And now marks the beginning of a new chapter. This episode is called A New Chapter because I am sharing with you all 3 beautiful, exciting news that are happening in my life right now. The first one is I'm going back to school again, and this time it is to get registered as a psychotherapist in Toronto so that I can be who my soul wants me to be, so I can embody that which my soul wants to embody, not who I was conditioned to think I wanted to be. A program that will allow me to cultivate, more skills to enhance my knowledge so that I can help and teach more people. I'm also excited to announce that my business partner and I are launching our fintech company that we've been working on for 2 years. Our company's mission is to help educate teenagers and young adults on everything related to money. We're going to release more information soon, but this venture wouldn't have been possible if I had not discovered through this whole journey that I love to educate, that my soul comes to life when I'm teaching. So when my friend brought up the idea to me 2 years ago, and the idea has, changed and we've pivoted quite a few number of times, but when he brought the idea to me and I realized that the foundation, the core of the idea lied in educating, young adults and in education, I was open to the opportunity. And I've also realized that, my purpose is not a specific career. My purpose, my dharma is to educate, is to teach. And I get to do that through as many mediums as I'd like. So I've also learned to allow myself to experience more and to expand and not to limit myself. The world is filled with, I can't even tell you, an abundance of opportunities and possibilities. As long as we know what our intention is on this earth, as long as we know, when does our soul come to life? What are we doing? Who are we with? What are we embodying? And then we can create around that. We can manifest around that. And lastly, I am excited and ready to share with you that I am in the most magical relationship with someone who my soul knows is the person for me in this moment in time. Someone who I am meant to experience this chapter of my life with. Someone who is committed to doing the work and co-creating the most loving, meaningful, and respectful relationship together. I've kept this, private in my heart for a while, but I felt like I'm at a place where I would love to share it. And so thank you for allowing me to share these 3 with you. And to be honest, I have no idea where life will take me. I am detached from the outcomes. I mean, honestly, the universe brought so many life quakes in my life centered around the theme of detaching that I have chosen to voluntarily accept and embody detachment. But I trust that the journey is what my soul needs to evolve, to grow, to learn, to expand. I have goals, plenty of them, but I am no longer the planner I once was. I have certainty that the work that I'm privileged to do, the ideas that come to me, the people that I get to meet, the places that I end up visiting, all of them, they're part of the universe's grand vision for me. And I am here to just allow the universe to manifest itself through me. And my job is to show up, to be the absolute best, to do my absolute best, to share, to surrender, to accept, and to love. So, thank you for being on this journey with me, for allowing me to do what I love to do, and for listening. And I promise you, the next episode is not going to be this long. We're going to go back to short solo episodes. But really, thank you for listening, for being on this journey. And as always, I am sending you lots and lots of love. And I will speak to you all soon. Bye.
Thank you for joining us this week on Minutes on Growth. If you enjoyed today's episode, then make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now.